Oh, here we go. We've got the old red light up for you, boys. Right. We're in the studio. We've got Led Zeppelin for you, and I'll reel them off. John Bonham, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones. Let's speak to John Paul Jones first. Now, I believe that you are a musical arranger as well as a composer. Is this true?
A musical arranger as well as a composer?
Yes.
No.
A composer as well as a musical arranger?
No, a musical arranger as well as a bass guitarist.
Musical. Can we do this again?
That you got a lot, and that's what I want. Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drive me insane. Hey, yeah, I got something you ought to know. Hey, baby, I wanna tell you that I love you so. I wanna hold you in my arms, yeah. I'm never gonna let you go, 'cause I like your charm. Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drive me insane.
Well, now then, people are encouraged, of course, to look at birds as they are to look at all sorts of things. But one thing that is sometimes not encouraged, according to the words of a song, is skiffle. And here is a song called Mama, what is it? Mama don't want me to play any skiffle? No.
Anymore.
No more.
Well, Mama don't allow no skiffle down here. Oh, no, she don't. Mama don't allow no skiffle down in here.
I'd been seduced by music coming out of the speakers, you know, the radio, and really it was American music that was sort of translated, either the real product coming through, the rock and roll, rockabilly, Little Richard, that sort of thing, or it was like the local heroes like Cliff Richard, or there was this guy called Lonnie Donegan who started like the whole skiffle movement, and skiffle meant that if you had a guitar, then you could actually possibly be able to play it and do these sort of songs. And a lot of the guitarists from the 60s, they all started off the same way, really. I actually sort of joined a band straight after school. I'd done a deal with my dad that I would keep my academic work up, because he didn't really quite know what was going on with all this guitar business. I'd promised to do all this, you know, to do my academic work, and I had. And in effect, I was in a group and we were doing sort of blues music, and the chess catalogue we were playing a lot of. During that point of time, as a kid, as a teenager, I'd already accessed sort of Indian music, Arabic music, rockabilly, country blues, which is the acoustic guitar playing, and the electric movement that had come out of Chicago, like chess records and all of that. When I got this opportunity to be a session musician, I also played harmonica. I was a young kid. I was sort of 7 years junior to anybody else that was in the session scene at that point of time.
So how did you become a session guitarist? I don't know, perhaps I thought I had the feel for it. How long have you been playing the guitar?
4 years.
Have you always been a session guitarist?
No, only in the last 18 months.
Do you play for a regular group yourself?
Yes, Neil Christian and the Crusaders.
And what sort of things do you do with this group?
Well, we do one-night stands all over England, most of the country.
What are the big names that you have backed on this?
Jed Harrison, Tony Meehan, Eden Kane, Duffy Powell.
What is it like working with some of the really big names of show business?
Disappointing.
Why is that?
Well, they don't come up to how you expect them to be. Rather disappointing on the whole, I would say.
But the fact that I had all these different styles of guitar that I felt passionate about, and I tried to learn, not too well, but at least I could, approach them all. It put me in good stead for this whole job as a studio musician, because you weren't a specialist as such. You went in there and you go right across the whole field of guitar playing, and it suited me quite well because I was self-taught, but I obviously was doing the right thing. Jeff Beck and I go back to the point where when we first meet, we've both got homemade guitars. So that's how far back we go. And Jeff and I had always spoken about, because I did I got accepted into the studio world, and I was really happy doing that because it was also quite creative up to a point. And Jeff had always said, "Oh, it'd be really good if you joined the Yardbirds," and because I'd helped Jeff get the job in the Yardbirds, and he did superb work in the Yardbirds. And I thought, yeah, it'd be really good. But there were 5 Yardbirds. But I happened to be there on the night where Paul Samuel Smith, who was the band's producer and writer and the bass player, where he quit the band. And they had a sequence of events coming up, like the Marquee Club was a big club in London, and they had that coming up. And it was said, there was a discussion, and I said, well, look, I'll play then. I'll go in on bass. I think I was so happy to get out of the world of the studio musician. Jeff isn't in the band anymore, and there's the 4 of us. But what happens with the 4 Yardbirds is that we're over here, and we're touring the whole of the underground circuit, and the Grandy Ballrooms in Detroit, the Fillmore, Winterland, and et cetera. But we'd built up like a cult audience, coming to these things and coming to see the Yardbirds and listen to what we were doing, which was pretty different to what was coming out on the singles. And I actually tried to encourage them to keep going, but they'd been through 3 guitar changes, and Keith Ralph had enough really of it. So when that band dissolved, and I had the opportunity, they dissolved in July of 1968. And what's so interesting here is that I'd made up my mind then that if they weren't going to continue, that I wanted to form my own band, and I knew exactly what it was that I wanted to do with it. And I was keen to form a band where I would produce it, because I didn't want to get anybody else. I didn't want to be in this situation like we had in the Yardbirds, where somebody was getting us to record things which had nothing whatsoever to do with the band. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew exactly how to go about doing it if I could find the personnel.
First instrument was piano, and then I took up bass and organ at about the same time. My father was my parents were in variety, what you would call vaudeville. And he was a great pianist and an arranger. And my mum was a singer and a dancer. They used to have like a musical comedy act. But he was kind of intimidating as a pianist, and so I wanted to take up the organ, just so not to be like Dad, you know. But then I really wanted to play bass guitar. And he said, "Son, don't take up the bass guitar." He said, "It's a novelty instrument. You'll never have, in 2 years' time, nobody will ever heard of one," right? So, but Dad, I really want. He said, "Well, take up the saxophone. You'll always work with the saxophone." I said, "No, I don't want to play the saxophone. I want to play the bass." So I managed to convince him to guarantee, because I was like 14, and then I paid for it by playing organ in church, and which I got $50 a year. A year. But they just covered the payments for the bass. And then of course he heard me playing and then thought, okay. And so by then he was doing sort of small, local gigs and stuff like that. So he went, okay, come with me. So I used to go on gigs with him. We had a trio or a quartet, whatever was required. And he just said, okay, watch my left hand. And so I did, and I learned a huge amount from that. It was a great experience.
I've got 3 pages here. These are solid pages of fact of the records that this man has been involved in over the years. And I'm not just talking Led Zeppelin, monstrous act of all time, etc. I'm talking about going back to 1963 with Jet Harris and Tony Meehan, who were part of the Shadows, right? The original Shadows with Richard.
Right.
And the Rolling Stones, P.P. Arnold, Lionel Bart, the Outlaws, etc. I mean, there's no way that you could. I'd need 5 hours to cover this. We'd need to do a series on all the things that you've done. But would you mind looking back at some of the stuff that you've done?
Okay.
Okay, and I'll just throw names at you. All right? Lulu.
Lulu. Oh, yeah, well, Lulu was my tenure with Mickey Most.
Yeah.
Lulu was a darling. When you were first called, you'd do 2-3 sessions a day, 6-7 days a week. And I was doing arrangements as well, but that was a bit later. And literally, you could do an Engelbert Humperdinck session, an Animals session, or somebody like that, a Dinah Washington session. I mean, it could be rock, rhythm and blues, country, but all in one day. You'd literally go from one studio to another. Hundreds of musicians crossing and recrossing London to different studios. And they'd put the parts in front of you, count you in, do a run-through, do a take, next title, and you'd make 2-3 titles in 3 hours, and then go on to a completely different style of music for the next session.
But you knew, by virtue of what you did, and by virtue of what Jimmy Page did, you both knew each other's skills.
Yeah.
Because Jimmy Page, too, was a session musician.
He'd bailed out a year or so before.
Right.
To join the Yardbirds.
So you already knew that you could intermingle with them musically. So.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
John, first of all, John Bonham, when did your musical career start, right from the beginning?
I was 14 years old, I think, something like that, when I was at school. That was about the beginning of it. Played in a school pantomime. And then it just sort of materialised from there, Left school and we formed small groups and things like that, and played locally and everything.
What musicians can you remember being impressed with when you were at school?
It's easy to say groups, really. I mean, in those days it was sort of like Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, and groups like Liverpool groups like the Hollies and things like that were a strong influence there.
When did you first become a full-time musician then?
When I was 16, I went full-time for a while. We had off and on periods. You'd like have an attempt, to make a success of a professional group, and then it wouldn't go the way you all planned it out to go, and you'd end up having to go back to work to get a little bit of money to carry on, to sort of live with, really. And that's how it used to go, really. You'd have a time, go out on the road and everything would be roses, and then all of a sudden, no more gigs, no more money, and you're back to where you started, And that's how it went on, really, right up until, just before Zeppelin started. Most of those groups, we used to just sort of play other people's stuff, It was like, you'd play anything from the latest hit by the Hollies to sort of, to something by a blues artist. It was that, that sort of thing you've got to do, to survive, really, to play locally anyway. And then, and that was about it then, because we, didn't do any writing or anything in those days.
I was at school at the time, and the people who had any influence at all on me weren't the people who had well, there were a lot of people at school who had about £5 a week pocket money, you know, which was a lot of money to have for pocket money, and they used to buy all the records that were around at the time, but they didn't really intrigue me. There was a folk club in the area, and going to that on a Friday night and seeing all these people with sloppy jumpers and beards and long hair, I went, well, that's an alternative, and the music was also an alternative. So I ended up playing in little blues duets, you know, in these folk clubs, disastrously, playing harmonica and all that. But it was the beginnings of it, and we formed several old blues bands. That we used to hire a room in a pub on a Friday night and charge about 3 shillings to get in, you know, and you get about 100 people in. And so that set me off on the road, and I suddenly found out that Friday nights weren't really as rewarding as Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays, you know, so it was down to a group of some sort and keeping that music around as well. So we started different groups, Black Snake Moan and the Crawling King Snakes, which John and I had. But as time went on, we found the only way to keep 10 shillings in your pocket was to play something apart from blues, you know. So we ended up playing Watch Your Step type stuff, Bobby Parker, things around that weren't really overplayed by anybody, you know, but they were really good things to do. I mean, people are still doing them now. We turned professional and tried to pull everything out of the bag that could be pulled out of the bag in publicity and everything, but it was no good because the group wasn't really any good. And by about 1966, we formed the Band of Joy. John eventually came into that, and we were doing Jefferson Airplane stuff. So we'd do about 3 gigs a week, some places around this area, which was the only places we could travel. You know, we had no agent in London or manager or anything like that. The music wasn't really a saleable commodity, you know, like if you're getting £15 a night or something like that, you've got to stick in this area, you know, otherwise you just don't make any money at all. So that was what it was all about, poverty, you know. So after about 12 months of poverty, John started playing with Tim Rose on drums, and I eventually started doing a blues duet yet again, but with Alexis Corner. And Alexis never works on anything that's a permanent basis. It's always very temporary, you know. He's got these TV commercials that he must do, and he has to write books on the blues and things. So he says, well, you can play with me when I feel like playing, you know. I'm going to Essen in about a month's time, come with me and all that, but I won't be doing anything in between. So I had to get something more solid together, and nothing came along at all. And then all of a sudden I had a telegram out of the blue saying Keith Relf had left the Yardbirds. And about a month later I was at Jimmy's place. And How did he hear of you? Through Terry Reid. He'd recommended me for the job after turning it down himself. So I went down to James's place, and he wasn't there, so I just went through all his records and pulled out the ones I liked, and he got back, and apparently he liked the same sort of thing, you know. So that was a start. We hadn't got a drummer, and I knew that there was only one drummer that was really any good that I'd ever seen, and that was John.
The idea of Led Zeppelin 1 that I had was that it was going to be a guitar tour de force. However, it was not going to be at the expense of the other musicians, so everyone was going to be featured, and the group character, if you like, the fusion of the musicians, was going to be representative of each of the individuals, and I think that that's really how it was on the first album.
Hey everybody, welcome to my brand new deep dive series. This time I'm going to be tackling the catalog of one of the greatest bands of the 1970s and of all time, Led Zeppelin. And today I'm talking about their first album, which was released on January 12th, 1969. It was recorded in September and October of 1968, and it only took 36 hours to record this phenomenal album. 36 hours. Think about the amount of time bands spend today recording an album, or even at the time. Think about how many months it took the Beatles just to record Abbey Road, or the Rolling Stones to record Let It Bleed, or CCR to record any of their albums. It's just mind-blowing. A debut album took basically a day and a half to record. Jimmy Page financed the album himself, along with the band's manager, Peter Grant.
The man who led Zeppelin, how important was Peter Grant?
Very.
very important. He believed in us right from the word go. He had, basically what he did was say that I'll take care of the business and all outside distractions, and I'll keep them away from you. And you just get on with the music. And he said, you do it your way, I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to tell you should do this or do that, or you're musicians, you do the music. I manage, that's what I do, and that's what he did. He just cleared this big space around us. I was talking to Ahmet Ertegun years later, who said we weren't even allowed to, we were afraid to come near you in case Peter got angry with us, you know. And they weren't at the recordings, you know, studios. They weren't allowed to hear the music until it was absolutely finished. I mean, it was a unique state of affairs, which very artistically, it was the best you could possibly have.
And really, you couldn't have asked for a better debut. It was a fusion of blues and hard rock, and this was actually one of the first hard rock albums that I owned, one of the first heavy bands that I ever got into. You have the virtuoso guitar playing of Jimmy Page, the fantastic bass work and keyboard work of John Paul Jones, those incredible vocals of Robert Plant, and the absolutely phenomenal drumming of John Bonham. The band had been formed in 1968, but they gelled very quickly. And what you hear on here is a band that is just entirely in sync with each other. But you've also got a lot of different styles of music represented on here. You've got folk music. There's the Joan Baez cover, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. You've got heavy hard rock. You've got bluesy rock on here. It vacillates between the light and the heavy, the fast and the slow. It's certainly not the best album in Led Zeppelin's catalog, but still, as a debut album, it really is breathtaking in its scope and in the musicianship of all the band members. The album opens with Good Time, Bad Times, and already it shows you, right when the song kicks off, just the versatile, incredible drumming of John Bonham. And it kicks the album into high gear right from the start. Good Times, Bad Times was just a salvo, and it really served notice to the rest of the rock and roll community that Led Zeppelin was going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, but I still don't seem to care.
And yeah, the guitar is great on this song, the bass is great on this song, Robert Plant's vocals are great on this song, but the thing that I always come back to, the thing that I pay attention to the most, is John Bonham's drumming. Just like most heavy songs that John Bonham played on, he is just beating the crap out of the drums. You listen to the kick drum, the tom-toms, the hi-hats, he is just going nuts on the drums in a way that we'd only heard drums played like that before with Keith Moon. But it's an amazing song, a great way to kick off the album. Then things immediately go softer. You have some light acoustic strumming. You think this is going to be a gentle acoustic ballad.
Baby, I'm gonna leave you. I said, baby, you know I'm gonna leave you.
Then you get into that first instrumental break, and suddenly it's getting louder, the tempo is shifting.
Leave you when the summer comes along. Baby,
quiets back down, and then it gets louder in the choruses. It just hits you over the head. And I love that juxtaposition of the gentle folk and the heavy rock. They balance that so well, just like Led Zeppelin would do throughout the course of their career. But to me, it's highlighted so brilliantly on this particular track. Track 3 is the great Willie Dixon number, You Shook Me. It had been covered by Jeff Beck on his album Truth, but Led Zeppelin does it in a completely different style. And this is a great showcase for Jimmy Page's great blues guitar playing, great harmonica playing. I love Robert Plant's vocal on this song. The heavy, heavy drumming from John Bonham. The last track on side 1 might be my favorite song on the album. Their cover of Dazed and Confused. I love the ominous bass line from John Paul Jones, and again, how it balances the light.
For so long it's not true. Wanted a woman, never bargained for you. Lots of people talking, few of them know. Soul of a woman was created below.
And at the end, it's just a guitar showcase. Very cool how the song ends. And you have, again, the light and the heavy and the slow and the fast. It sets such an ominous mood, this particular song. And they would extend this song well over 30 minutes in their live performances, and Jimmy Page would break out the bow. And it did get a little self-indulgent in concert, let's be honest. But here on the record, it is such an intoxicating version of this song. I love it. Side 2 opens, which this is kind of a bit of folk rock, I guess you could say, but I love that church organ at the beginning. It just goes on. John Paul Jones playing this heavenly organ intro. It gets quiet, and then he starts playing the opening chords of Your Time Is Gonna Come. This one, I've got the cassette version, and side 2 actually is side 1 on the cassette. And so for the longest time, I thought this was the album opener, and I think it would have worked well as an album opener too. But I love kind of the pastoral nature of this song.
Cheating, hurting, that's all you seem to
do. It's not knocking you over the head with the instrumentation. It just kind of moves along in a very folky, lazy kind of way, but I love it. Great vocal by Robert Plant, great acoustic guitar work. Then we have the Jimmy Page acoustic instrumental, Black Mountain Side. And this has got a folky flavor to it, but I also hear like some Eastern rhythm in his guitar playing. And the song meanders, but not in a boring way. I like the way that this moves along at a brisk pace. It's a great acoustic instrumental number, and I love how it segues right into one of the heaviest songs on the album, Communication Breakdown. Just a blistering dose of early heavy metal, and it showcases the way the band could work as a tight little ensemble. And it's not a very long song. They take care of business, and then it's over. Then we have another Willie Dixon composition, I Can't Quit You Baby, which is another slow blues workout, but it's so cool. Jimmy Page's guitar work on here is just fantastic. John Bonham's drum work with those drum fills is excellent. Everybody is just kicking ass on this song. And I never liked the blues until I heard Led Zeppelin. And like many people, then I would go back and rediscover these original chess recordings. But on here, the heaviness doesn't overpower the song. A great arrangement, a great cover. And then we have another dose of heavy metal. How many more times to wrap up the album? And I love the interplay between the bass and the drums. Jimmy Page, obviously, shredding on guitar. Robert Plant howling his lungs out. A great way to close out the album. Gets into a marching, strident kind of a beat. And then they do a quick little version of The Hunter. And then they wrap it all up. And there you have it. An incredible, incredible album. A great debut album. Again, not the best Led Zeppelin album, but for 1969, I'm sure it blew people's heads off to hear that. This is, I don't know what kind of pressing this is. I don't know if this is a 60s or a 70s press, but it's got the yellow lettering here. This is my remastered version with the red lettering. Got a couple versions on CD. This is the original CD release with the yellow lettering. This was the remastered version from the 90s. And then, I don't know, several years back, they did a 2-disc version of the remastered version, and then you've got a live disc on part 2. Didn't grab my cassette version, but anyway. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think of Led Zeppelin's debut. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.